Okay, the question is, should we always try to negative split a race, or is it more course or length dependent? Um, I did actually talk with you about this, so we've kind of already been through it, but I'm still going to answer it here. So, first of all, I just kind of reject the premise. I do not think really in most circumstances you should be trying to negative split a race. I think even pacing is something that we want to be aware of, and if you find that you are kind of consistently dramatically slowing down late in the race, then yeah, I think it's probably appropriate to work on some endurance and develop your aerobic conditioning. But no, it's not course or length dependent. Well, maybe it is, but generally, I kind of reject the premise that you should always be trying to negative split a race. So, um, yes, we do want to be racing at a pace that is generally maintainable through the race. But again, unless you're finding that you consistently kind of fall away dramatically late in the race, I don't think this is something that you want to be really heavily focused on. Particularly, you don't want to be racing the first half of the race so conservatively that you are giving up a lot of time that way because. Well, knowing you, knowing your particular situation, I know you're talking about off-road racing. And for example, with an XC race, positioning at the start of the race is just so critical to the outcome of the race that you have to be willing to blow up a little bit. And that likely means compromising some of your late race speed. It likely means being a little bit faster on the first lap or the early part of the race. But again, unless you find that you're going backwards pretty dramatically late in the race, it is going to be worth it to like a little bit overpace the start in order to have a good position, just given the importance of positioning in these races. I will add, I see this kind of innate desire to be, not even desire, this innate hesitation to be aggressive with pacing. I see this more in women than men, and I don't know if this is like due to our innate physiology of like this more risk averse nature. But men tend to be a little bit more willing to blow up. And it is much more common that as a coach, I hear from a man or I observe in a man's race file that they blew up. It's much more common than for women. And yet, women tend to be the ones who are. I will hear something like, I didn't go hard enough because I was worried about blowing up. So these are generalizations, of course. There are certainly exceptions to this, which I see, frequently as well. But my point is, women tend to be more concerned about blowing up. And I think it really holds a lot of women back because, and this is something that I say a lot in my coaching, which is you don't find the limit until sometimes you blow right past it. And sometimes races are just for learning, and you can look back and call it, like, be able to say that was a failure, I really blew up. But ultimately, you got so much out of that situation when you did blow up, because that's when you learn the most. And I think a lot of women just never go to that place, that irrecoverable place. And it's really important to do it because that's how you learn where it is. For well-trained riders, you can go really quite deep and recover. And I think, there's also kind of a hesitation to trust your fitness with that. And, again, you have to be pretty fit to be able to do that. But a lot of times, again, for well-trained riders, it's doable. If you overpace the start, are you going to turn the same lap time the last lap as the first? Probably not. But if you overpace the start and you have good positioning in the single track, are you going to have a better overall result than if you hold back and you're now clogged in the single track? Usually, yes, you will. And that's an important piece of off-road racing. So if your aerobic conditioning is pretty shallow, yeah, maybe it's a different story that you can't then recover and hold a decent pace. But again, I think you have to try. You've got to find the limit in order to know where it is. And sometimes finding that limit means blowing right past it. And And also, if you do blow up and it's irrecoverable, you learned where the limit is for one, but also you learned you have some work to do on your aerobic conditioning, and that's also valuable learning that you didn't have without that. So if you approach every race conservatively and say that you're going to try to negative split it, I think you never really open yourself up to the possibility of that learning. And to me, that's a much bigger loss. Again, because I know you and I know that you're going to do a 100-mile mountain bike race this year, that may be a different situation where you do need to be pretty conservative at the start. Positioning is not going to be as critical. You're also doing a 50-mile race this weekend. And again, that one is going to be somewhere in the middle because positioning is going to matter, but it's certainly not as critical as an XC race. It's certainly not as not critical as a 100-mile race. So this is going to be one where you've now done some XC racing. So you have a sense of that pacing. Now you're going to expand it a little bit to a 50-mile race where you're going to be a little bit conservative. And I think it's fair enough to be pretty conservative in a 50-mile mountain bike race. But I don't think the goal of negative splitting the race is necessarily appropriate. I think you have to go with the in-race sensations, your RPE, and as well the pace and intensity of the riders around you, because we're not doing time trials here. We are racing other riders, and it is a lot more fun when you get to battle. And again, you're going to learn a lot more, and you will likely get a lot more out of yourself when you have the stimulus of other riders around you. So no, you are not always trying to negative split the race.